Awesome. Welcome to Motivated Masculine Men podcast, where we strive to inspire, educate, and challenge men to embrace healthy masculinity, deepen their relationships, optimize their health, and step boldly into their purpose. I have a great guy. I've done a little bit of research around Scott today, but we're going to get to know each other as always while we're here recording. Scott, I was just saying before we hit the record button, I just went through a rebrand of the podcast. It used to be called Fight the Burnout because I went through some major burnout years back, coming out of in law enforcement here in New Zealand. And yeah, so we rebranded it because now I want to help men specifically, and really in their relationships as well, is kind of where I'm kind of have been feeling I need to lean in the last couple months. Just help them find relationships, intimate ones especially, but through that, really finding that purpose, that drive of that internal masculinity, which I know you reached out to me to be on here today to talk about this, and you have some really cool insights. As I said before, I've done a little bit, have researched you a little bit recently, and it's cool the stuff that you're doing. So yeah, man, tell us a little bit about like who you are. I want to know your elevator pitch, as well as like who Scott truly is. Like, let's talk about that, and like what's going on in your life as well, because these are conversations where you might not have unless you're having a drink or a whiskey or just sitting around a bonfire. So I'd love to, yeah, who is Scott?
Yeah, so it's funny. 2 years ago, I don't think I knew who that guy was. So like you, burnout, and really burnout was just misalignment in every aspect of my life, and
Preach it.
just looked like I had done it, right? I mean, I looked like I had made it. I was doing all the things that society said would make me successful. And dude, I was just tore up inside. I mean, I was miserable and had to go through a lot of work to kind of get my life reset. And now I'm on a path of rebuilding and rebuilding from a spot of truth. So my name's Scott Fasano. I'm a father, I'm a husband, and I'm a man on a mission to do much like yourself, right? I just want to change the world, right? And for me, clearly got a masculine heart, and I want to help guys like you and I, guys like us, to find life again, right? For me, I was doing all the things and I was putting off life until someday, right? I've got an incredible family, got a 24-year-old daughter, and she was there while her dad was making it, right? She was there while I was putting in the long work weeks, and went from the guy loading bags on airplanes to the guy sitting in the corporate office at a US airline. And then got to have two more kids. So had a vasectomy when my oldest daughter was 2, had that vasectomy reversed 15 years later. 1% chance of that working, and it worked. Not once, but twice. And for me, one of my biggest moments, and there's so many moments in these journeys, but one of my biggest moments was we're at my son's gender reveal. And when my daughter was born, my oldest daughter, the doctor just told you, hey, it's a girl, and you moved on. But now we have to do a gender reveal, right? There's got to be this big
And it's got to
orchestration.
be on TikTok and Instagram
That's it.
and
Yeah, dude, for me, I mean, I can be there now. That blue balloon, as soon as I saw it cross that box, and as soon as I realized I was having a son, my immediate thought was, he can't be anything like me, right? Which was a wild
ooh,
thought, right? Because again, I was successful, right? I mean, I was defying odds at every turn. I was way more than what I should have been based on all standards, right? I went to college for 2 weeks, right? And here I am, an executive, right? So I was defying all the odds, and everyone would have said I was doing amazingly well, but that was the truth of where I was actually standing, is I was so buried in my own silent suffering internally. I just knew I couldn't raise a boy to turn out to a man like me. And that sent me on an expedition to go find the man that I really was inside.
wow, man, thanks for sharing that. I can somewhat relate. Audience will know, but obviously we're here to get to know each other. My story, I'll tell you it real quick, not to take the spotlight off of you, just so you know who
Yeah.
you're talking to. If you haven't watched my first, actually, I need to redo that. I've got an intro one for like episode number one is me introing myself, and it has to do with like police, and my journey's completely changed. That was just before COVID, my first episode launched.
Wow.
Because a marketing guy that I was talking to was like, dude, you have to start a podcast. And I was like, and he's like, I'll be your first guest. And I was like, okay, cool. And so yeah, but um my story is lost identity as well, man. Like it's so Interesting. Mine was I'm originally from California. Grew up to a very successful family. My mom was doing her pride is she was just shy by like 5 grand of $1 million in a year for revenue as a chiropractor running her own practice. So super successful female, mother. My dad ended up going back to school, became a chiropractor as well. Then they put my brother and I on a sailboat and we sailed halfway around the world and left the United States in 2000. Got here, didn't know what I really wanted to do, had a lot of the pressures of you got to go to college, you got to do these things and pressures, and then also the support of do what do who you are and do what you want. You can do anything kind of thing. But yeah, and so I went to university. I did not enjoy it. I then met my now wife on the pathway actually as I was going to be exiting New Zealand to go work on super yachts. Met her, decided to stay, didn't know what I wanted to do, became and then kind of fell into the idea of joining law enforcement here in New Zealand. And so then I ended up going down that pathway. It was a long pathway. It took me 2 years to get in because they didn't need another white male in the police. And then I did that for 7.5 years in highlights, I did everything from frontline all the way to I was the Secret Service as such. So New Zealand's version of Secret Service did my protection for 3.5 years, looking after our prime minister, and then overseas diplomats when they come in. Highlight working alongside Secret Service when President Biden was vice president and came to New Zealand, so I got to see how they worked and all that. But it took my heightened paranoia to a next level. During that, plus you add all the trauma. I remember my first day on the job, I went to a guy who'd been dead for 3 weeks. And if you're not familiar with that, I'm not going to describe it out, but it is not, I still can't smell the trash. My wife has to tell me to take the trash out because of a trauma response to the smell. And so I left. I left because halfway through my career, I went to counseling. My wife and I were struggling real hardcore. I went to counseling, thought I worked through it all. I didn't have any tools or strategies, which I know we'll talk about today. And then from there, we ended up, I thought I was good. I thought I just needed to change off of front line. And that's when I went down the diplomatic protection side. I always wanted to do our version of SWAT. I got told I couldn't do that because I failed the selection test twice. The second time brutally, but the first time I didn't get it, and it threw me pretty bad. I still kept focused on it, but went down the diplomatic protection route because I was fit, had the skills, and got accepted to kind of all through the qual course and everything. As I said, my heightened paranoia, I threw my paranoia and hate for people through the roof even more. And then I ended up in the end almost found myself at a friend's house with a mutual friend and found myself. And if you've never been there, it sounds kind of lame in my mind, but I found myself planning how to sleep with another woman that was there. Found myself making moves, found myself hitting on her, found myself and caught myself because my parents cheated on each other. And my wife and I always said, if we ever get to that stage, we honor the other person, we break it off and we move on. And so my wife was overseas for work and she came back. I told her it was interesting at the time. I had friends who were telling me, do not tell her. And so it was like you said, it's this identity crisis of like, what do I do? Who am I? Like, who is this person that I'm looking? I don't even know this person that I'm looking in the mirror.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I went home. I told her I wanted a divorce. I was done. She got me to go to counseling, and we're still together 8 years later, stronger than ever, because I started to work on myself and figure out who the hell is Chris when I look in the mirror.
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing when you I mean, those times were the roughest. I ended up taking 3 months. I still wanted to leave my wife, the counselor, with the counselor's help. She's like, Chris, you're burned out. You're done. Like the work is just draining you more than it's filling you. And no matter what you do outside of work while you're working, you need to take a break. My police brain went, she hates cops. She wants one less on the road.
Yeah.
I came back to the US and did 3 months on a motorcycle and just I literally forced myself to talk, interact like this. Is why I love the podcast and meeting new people, because that's what I did for 3 months on a motorcycle, just literally forcing myself to talk and interact with people that I wouldn't normally. Homeless guys, sitting down buying a homeless guy a cup of coffee. First instinct was buy him a coffee because then he won't steal your shit off your bike. But then had the greatest conversation. He was a veteran. He was going through stuff. He was struggling. He had challenges. So again, I want to praise you, Scott, for coming and being on here and us talking. Tell me, what was the first step? Like, what did you do to when you went, oh my God, I don't want my son to be like me? One, how'd that make you feel?
Yeah, dude. It was wild, right? Because I have an older daughter, right? So and her and I had done amazing together, right? And by all measure, every measure, I was an incredible father, right? So I knew it wasn't about being a father, right? I knew that this was a thing with raising a man. And I knew then, and my father and I always had our relationship was strange. We just didn't like each other, right? I mean, we were father and son, but there was just this dislike for each other. In our house, I have a brother, and we basically were, I was my mother's son, my brother was my father's son. And that's how we ran our house. My mom died, and essentially I became the island, right? So now I was on my own. So I was just moving through life and just kind of grinding a bit on what I'm supposed to do, right? How am I supposed to act? And for me, buried in drinking, I was a extremely heavy drinker. I was the guy that could outdrink everyone. Anywhere we went, I could
And
just
probably proud of it.
Oh, dude, yeah, right. And I was the guy that was dangerous to hang out with, other people, right? I mean, because I would get other people so hammered, and the next morning, right, 5:30, I'm at the gym, right? And I'm just moving through my day. I didn't have hangovers chasing me. I didn't get sick at night, right? I was just moving through the day, but it was destructive, and it was destructive for the people that hung out with me. And it just was, I mean, the reality behind that was I hated every second of it, right? I didn't enjoy being out. It was one of those things where it just like we would go out, I would come home and be like, all right, I need a break. And later that night I'm out doing the same thing again, hanging out with my buddies. And it was just this ache of I've got to figure this out. And for me it was looking ahead to, oh, if I just have some more money, right? If I just have this next title, right? So I threw myself into work. Work became my identity, right? I was the guy that could fix anything. I was the guy that would help anyone, right? I was the people pleaser. And, for me, I started to just allow myself to really look and say, why do I feel a certain way? That question I had about my son and just knowing I couldn't raise him, it was really around I knew that I didn't have a good upbringing, but I couldn't remember anything about my childhood. So I remembered physical violence, right? I remembered all that stuff, but my entire childhood was just lost. We lived in upstate New York until I was 15, and I just didn't have much recollection about that. But it was still just this, and you said it earlier, it was identity. I didn't even know who I was. I was successful, right? I was all this. So I started just asking myself, like, what's the truth? How do I really feel about this? How do I really feel about that? And I started letting myself tell the truth a little bit. And I started surrounding myself with some people that were helping me. And I've done psychedelic work. I've done some therapy work. I did internal family systems therapy, which is just ridiculously powerful. And as I started to do that stuff, I started to uncover certain things. I would be in a therapy session and I would just say something like at one point I said, I hate everything about work. I hate my job. And to the point where the whole room would stop, right? And the person I would be in therapy would be in therapy with, she would look at me and say, did you mean what you just said? And I would just say, yeah, I had never let myself consider that, but yeah, I hate that. I actually don't want anything to do with work. It
Because
was,
hate's a very strong word, which is why she would
oh,
have.
it was everything was such an opposite from what life looked like, right? It was just like I would be doing this thing and I would look at it and say, I can't stand it. I actually would rather be homeless than I would be doing that. And just it just kept grinding and kept grinding and kept grinding. And and I think probably from your own work, you work on all the other stuff, right? I was working on being less angry. I was working on not drinking as much, right? I was working on all of these other things. And then one night I was sitting down here at this desk and I was preparing for a session. We were going to do internal family systems therapy. And I was reading ahead in the workbook, right? Because I'm a performer and I'm an achiever. And I was just writing and I wrote down three questions. I wrote down, how dare you question me? Then I wrote down, why are you calling me a liar? And then I wrote down, why do you think I'm a bad person? And it was one of those things where I actually pushed myself back from the desk and I just sat for a few minutes. And then I ran upstairs and just was letting myself relax in the recliner. And it was pretty late at night. I remember it was the NBA, the All-Star break was on, and it was the slam dunk tournament. And I was sitting in my recliner, and all of a sudden I just had this thought. And the thought was, do you want to know a secret? And it was one of those moments where I just pushed it off. And then it came back a few minutes later and said, do you want to know the secret? And I let it sit for just 30 seconds. And dude, next thing I know, I was in my childhood. I was in the bathroom of the house where we grew up
Wow.
and dropped right into the abuse I faced as a child that I didn't remember. I was abused by my father for years as a kid, and I had no idea. And I was dropped right into the middle of it to see it, to experience some of it. And a lot of people think that that's a moment that may break people, right? That, everyone came rushing to my aid. And the reality for me was it was a relief because for me, it was like now I knew I wasn't broken. Now I knew I wasn't a worthless piece of shit, right? Because that's how I felt, right? I spent my whole life feeling worthless. Spent my whole life feeling broken. And that what changed for me was I realized that I could hide shit from myself. I realized that I could lie to myself.
It's amazing, isn't
And
it?
that night was the night where I started going, all right, what else am I hiding from myself?
It's amazing when you realize that like the brain does weird things. Like I remember to piggyback off of yours and kind of support it. I remember when I was going through, I've done NLP training, so neuro-linguistic programming training. And I remember going through it and I got introduced it because I went to a Tony Robbins Date with Destiny conference and realized that's what he was, like got told that's what he was doing. And I think he mentioned it to somebody else and it got concreted in. And anyways, and I remember going through it and I was, during the training and everything, you're getting it done to you. And I was like in this massive growth phase coming out of that trip that I told you. And when you realize that the mind blocks traumatic things and reinterprets it to save you, and it's not it gets interpreted in so many different ways just to help you. Either it destroys you or it helps you or blocks it out. You start to realize, oh my God, I'm not actually who I am. I need to uncover those things so I can find the true Chris or the true Scott. And then once you find that true Scott, well, it sucks during the time and it's hard as hell, isn't it, Scott? Then once
Yeah.
you realize it, you're like, that's the true me. Okay, cool. Now what do I want to do with it?
Yeah. It's funny because everyone says it's really hard. And I agree, right? I had to face some stuff about myself that was really, really uncomfortable. But the hook is, and I say this to everyone, it's like, guess what? You already know. You're already carrying it, right? So
It's in
it's
the
not
back of your
like you're
head.
gonna
It's
go
in that little
outside and
box in the back of your brain that is just festering and
yeah.
infecting everything else. But it's already there. Like you're already running off of that story. Now you get to decide once you identify it and you see it. And I remember when I was going through doing a lot of NLP stuff, and I'd love your thoughts on this, Scott. I'm probably going to go off on a little bit of a side tangent here. When I was going through all my stuff, especially in the law enforcement realm, there's a lot of things of some people and some psychologists will say we can't have them relive it. We can't have them relive the trauma because it can break them. It can like all these different reasons why. And then there's others that are like not like in a safe space. And this is where I was always with NLP especially is you take people back to it, but you're in a safe place. You're in a place of safety and a place of comfort, not in and amongst it. So you never have somebody when you're doing like the hypnotherapy in a way, you're never taking them and having them stand back in their shoes. You're having them observe from a third person, but you're reliving it. You are re-seeing it. As you said, all came flooding back to you like you were there, like you could see it, like it's a movie picture that you're watching your life happen. What's your thoughts on that whole re-experiencing it versus talking through it, working through it, but not actually taking yourself back to re-experience it to see, in my opinion, see the truth or as truthful as you can see it through your eyes and you're remembering.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because, and this comes up a lot, and I always try to be a little bit careful, right? Because first of all, everyone looks at trauma differently, right? So everyone, when I bring up my trauma, everyone thinks it's the worst thing in the world. But I'm around guys all the time. I spend a lot of time with executives and entrepreneurs that I work with, and the one trauma that I can't even imagine bearing is bullying. Right. When I see people that were bullied, like I just look at the stuff they went through. And for me, it looks like man, I could never imagine living that way, right? So I think the trauma side of it is it's really how it affects the person. But for me, it wasn't really about experiencing the trauma, right? It wasn't about experiencing the abuse. For me, it started with realizing all of the decisions I made about my life from that trauma, right? I mean,
Mm,
I was in fifth grade being abused by my father. No one was coming to help me. The pediatrician knew, right? I mean, I was at the pediatrician once a week for the next injury from falling down on my bike or falling down the stairs or falling down the stairs on my bike, right? There was always this made up story. So I was this kid that was living a reality in a house, but the moment I walked outside of that house, that reality wasn't true. It never existed. And there that kid made a bunch of decisions that set the course for my life, right? I'm alone. No one's coming to help me, right? And I can go through all of the list of things that I was programmed in, and that's how I started to build my life. And I'm now in my 30s, now I'm in my 40s, and I'm still living on those decisions, right? Those decisions made by a kid that's being abused horrendously. Yeah, and you just look and say, like, those were the moments where I think that you have to just go back. And again, that's not about reliving everything. That's just about you reclaiming the truth, right? To look at it and say, hey, that's actually not who I was, right? Who I am is this person, right? And I was just being abused, right? And now I can start to go back and just reframe some of those decisions I made.
I'm glad you mentioned the reframing because we are all living our childhood. We are
Yeah.
the person who we are because of everything that happened for us until we were about 7. And then it gets reconcreted in at about as a teenager, then in your 20s, and then normally later in life you'll have something if you haven't ever worked through or identified any of these things. But then you get to, as you said, you get to reclaim, you get to rewire because now you can identify where it all comes from. In a way, you can shift the blame. You can be like, oh yeah, that's my old wiring. That's my story that's my 5-year-old coming back telling me because of the experiences that I had then.
Yeah.
And then what do you do next with it, Scott? I want to know what you do next with it because I have my thoughts, I have my opinions on what we do next with it or what I do next with it. What do you do next with it?
Yeah.
Once you identify it, now you've identified it. You're like, yep, cool. I respond, I get angry, I go out and drink, I have a loss of identity when I find out I have a boy because I was abused as a 5-year-old because of these situations and these things that I can now remember. But what's that thing that you do next with it? Like, what do you tell yourself? Because this is so important, especially for men, because we hold ourselves to such high standards.
Yeah. Yes.
Especially if we're trying to be a masculine man and we're in this modern, really strange world. So what do you do next? Like, what do you do when you have that moment? Like, because I'm sure that they still come up. I know I have them. So you can never run away from them.
Yeah, dude. So it's funny, and so I have a Substack, and at some point we'll share it in the notes or whatever. But I write daily, so every day I write, and it's essentially my journal, and it's talking about exactly what we're talking about now. Is I just write what comes up, right? And it's the simplest thing that can go on sometime today, and it'll trigger me to react in some way that doesn't make sense, right? And I'll project, like I'll be all of a sudden screaming right mad at my wife, and then I'll just look and be like, wait a minute. So for me, to answer your question, that's why I started Defy Tomorrow. So Defy Tomorrow is essentially breaking the cycle, right? For me, tomorrow was this endless cycle of the next day and the next day and the next day, all the same shit on replay over and over again. And for me, Defy Tomorrow is about breaking the cycles, right? And looking and saying, this response does not make sense for what's actually happening right here, right now. Right? I was having these huge responses to the tiniest thing that had nothing to do with my actual response. So for me, it was just putting an end to the cycles. And I think that's some of the hardest work because you don't get to blame anyone anymore, right? And you don't, the hook though is it's not even fully your fault, but you're in control of it, right? So for me, I was the world's greatest projector. I had a 3-year-old son. I've got a daughter right behind him, right? And the house is happy, right? And all I'm bringing home every day is anger, frustration, and impatience, right? So that's all I'm pushing out into the house.
That's all you getting
And
back, I bet, as well.
that's it. Yeah. And you just look at that, and right now I could see my son was mimicking my actions, right? He would be out in the yard with me mowing the lawn, and his lawnmower wouldn't start, right? And he would be pushing the lawnmower around and stuff. So I got to see how I was acting, right? And I just looked at it and said, man, like this isn't about the lawnmower, right? This isn't about this moment I just had with my wife. Like, what in the hell is going on? And for me, it was writing. I would just sit down sometimes and just write. And I wouldn't write to tell a story. I would just let the words flow.
It's
Right?
amazing when
Whatever
you do
needed
that,
to
isn't
come
it?
out, man, for me, it changed everything, right? Because that's how you tell the truth. If you can just let yourself speak or write without thinking and just write it out, dude, you expose everything, right?
And
Because
then
the words just come.
and then when you think you're done, write another. My mom told me this one time. She's like, when you think you're done, write another page.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
just everything that's in your head, even if it just sounds like gibberish putting down on a piece of paper, just write another page. And you always end up writing another like 5 or 6. And you're like, what
Yeah,
just happened?
yeah. So my deal was I was always able to put a good spin on things because I'm a good writer. I've always been a good writer, as a good writer from a kid. So I'm able to craft anything into a great story. So what I had to do, and this is the framework of what I've built inside of Defy Tomorrow, is I used AI for what AI is actually meant for, and that's to just find patterns in our speech, right? To just look at your words and reflect them back to you. So I did all of my work inside of ChatGPT. So I would just write, and I call them brain dumps, like you're saying, and I would just fast as I could type, sometimes 10 pages, and I would give it to ChatGPT and say, "What does this say?" And dude, it just holds up a mirror and says, "That's what you just said."
I've never thought about that. That is
Oh,
actually a
dude,
very good tool. Like, yeah,
epic, epic.
because it
Yeah.
will pick out the patterns. I mean, you have to be careful because it'll pick out the patterns. Like you start to get like you can start to get a I mean, it can be coerced in that, but at the same time, yeah, it'll pick out the patterns that it sees. That's a cool tool. I like that, man.
Yeah. Yeah. So I did it accidentally. I was at this corporate retreat, right? A business retreat, and I was trying to sort out like what was next for me. I hadn't admitted that I hated work yet, but I knew I was trying to figure out what was next. Because for me, I would achieve the next thing and I would immediately move the goalpost. I would achieve that thing and I would immediately move the goalpost.
Typical,
So I sat
typical
down.
man.
Yeah, absolutely. We
It's a
do.
trait. It's what we do.
Yeah.
We solve the problem and we move to the next one.
That's it. So I sat down my first time ever using ChatGPT and I did this. And basically people use this exercise in different ways, but essentially you just do a brain dump and then I asked ChatGPT to turn that brain dump into a paragraph about the words that I wrote. And it gave me this really nice paragraph and there was some in it that had some sharp edges in it. And then you turn that paragraph into a sentence. And then you turn that sentence into a word.
What was the first word?
Restless. And dude, it was like,
Ooh.
bam. Yeah, I'm telling you.
I can see it. I can see it from what you said so far.
Oh, and and it was one of those things where I was like, I felt like I had just been accused, right? And again, like all it was my words. It didn't have any other context other than exactly what I had given it.
Yeah.
And it held up the mirror and said, "You're not a high achiever. You're not an extremely successful guy, right? You're not the guy that gets it done. You're restless." And I get goosebumps just talking about it now because that was a moment, right, where I looked and said, "That's incredibly true."
That 5-year-old Scott back in the day, was he restless?
That kid was just looking for help, man. He was looking for anyone that could give him some help, right? I went through the abuse until fifth grade. And no one, a couple people tried to help, but they didn't try real hard, right? So for me, my life was lived always looking for threats and always making sure that I didn't get my ass kicked when I got home for saying too much. And if I had the chance to get him caught, I needed to make sure that I had at least two or three people on board because we lived in a small town. Everyone was afraid of him. So for me, I was constantly looking and saying, is this person able to help me? Is this person looking to hurt me? So that really framed how I interacted with people and I had to stay on the move, right? Because if someone started to get suspicious, I had to stay away from them, right? Because I couldn't answer any of their questions. So restlessness chased me through life, right? I had to stay moving. So no one could ask me any questions because I could not answer them. When I answered questions, I ended up getting my ass kicked when I got home.
Yeah. I want to shift a little bit here. And again, thanks for sharing everything. I know, thanks for continuing to tell this story because I know that there'll be men out there that are in the position that you were in, or you and I were in, where we kind of have that kind of shift, that thing that happens that we're just like, oh my God, like this can't continue anymore. I want to shift the conversation just a little bit. How has this identified or helped you identify yourself and how you view and see masculinity within yourself?
Yeah, it's funny. I had this sensationalized version of me that was Superman. So my mom had tagged me with Superman fairly young, and that was because
We lost. While we wait for Scott to come back, obviously some internet issues. I just want to say thank you all for being here, for watching, and make sure you hit that like and subscribe button so that we can get this out to more people. And if you want to reach out to us, or if you want to be on the podcast, our email is brotherhood@motivatedmasculinemen.com. And here's Scott back. Let's get going. Here we go. Scott, I paused the recording, but we're just jumping back in. I was just kind of giving a little bit of a make sure you like and subscribe. obviously technical issues, but hey, that's what happens. You were
Yeah.
literally, you had just said your mother had tagged you as Superman at an early age, and then you froze. It was a great phrase though. Like you had that Superman pose kind of going on. It was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. So, she tagged me with Superman because I could endure the abuse, right? I can endure the pain, right? And that's what I thought being a man was, right? I thought what being a man was I could carry everything. Being a man was I thought everyone needed to depend on me, right? I mean, I was running very large companies, right? People's payroll depended on my decisions every day, right? I mean, hundreds of families, right, because of decisions I made. And that's what I thought being a man was about, right? Being the provider. And listen, the last thing that you think anyone wants to hear when you're a man that's in high position, being a provider, is that you're nervous or that you're scared or that you're not really sure you know the right answer, right? And that's the stuff that men keep bottled up, right? I mean, men, and I work with hundreds of men, and I ask this question all the time is, do you lie to yourself? And every man, without question, says yes because there's no other way, right?
The
There's
fake
no
it till you
other
make
way
it.
to move through. What's that? That's it. Yeah. Yeah. And you look and right, I mean, the other aspect of it is we all make a choice, right? We all make a choice. Am I going to betray the people I'm responsible for, the people I'm responsible to, whether it's real or perceived, or am I going to betray myself, right? And what being a good man is, to some degree, is betraying yourself for the better of others, right? And that is a very, very slippery slope, right? Because when you're in that position, and we've talked about self-identity, the pile gets too big, the stack of stuff gets too big, and you start to forget who you really are and what you're really supposed to be working on, right? And what's really important to you.
And that changes as you go through life as well, just FYI,
Absolutely.
guys. But as Scott and I have talked about so far today, you got to first identify who you are. And guess what? They start back as that childhood. So, you got to dig back into there, which I'm sure we'll talk about tips and like how you guide people through that kind of journey. With what you were saying, it's so funny. Like there's the three P's. Well, I believe there's the three P's of masculinity. The third P can kind of change depending, but it's provide, protect, and then either procreate, preside. The third P can kind of shift a little bit, but it's that kind of procreate and preside over your. And it's funny you saying that lying to yourself, the I'm looking after people, I'm the Superman. It falls into that provide side. And then it's like, oh, I gotta lie to people. I've gotta put myself second so that then I can provide. But the man who doesn't provide to himself or protect himself first is the man who destroys everything around him. He cannot
Absolutely.
procreate. He cannot preside over his life. He cannot do the third P in any aspect
Yeah.
without first protecting and providing for himself so that then he can fully protect and provide those around him, his family, his new relationship, his current relationships. And you see it all the time. Like, I mean, I take it are you divorced, Scott, or no?
Divorced once, married now. Two.
So
Yeah.
I haven't been divorced. My wife is so strong she wouldn't let me go. But I know when we went to counseling, the counselor was like 85 to 90% of people will not make it through what you guys are going through. And I remember that in that time, I don't remember a whole lot. Like my wife still has to tell me exactly what the conversations that were had. It's a lot of those because thing of burnout and trauma is that memory loss, and so I consistently like challenge myself on what was actually the truth of back then. But I do remember that, and I remember, and we talk about it to this day, is how is it that 85% of people wouldn't make it through a hard time? If you're not there for the hard times, how can you expect to be there for the good times? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that initial. Well, now that I know that you were divorced, and I hope you're okay with us talking about that, Scott, because I know there's a lot of learnings in it. And if you're happily married now, then I guarantee you did learn from it. It sounds like you have. From those three P's and from what we've just talked about around like that, having to be the protector, having to protect everybody else around you. What did you learn, or what weren't you doing? As a true man, I believe you're on the same page here. As a true man, we take ownership. What was it that you weren't providing and protecting in yourself and then also in your family in that first marriage? Just more in the lens of for men in that are listening so that they can maybe try and shift or identify something in themselves so that they can start to work on it in the way that they need to.
Yeah. For me, it was presence, right? And just being in life without the numbing, right? Without any of it. I had zero ability. And again, this goes back to restlessness, right? And restlessness is not being able to sit still, right? I was uncomfortable sitting still, which meant I didn't want to just sit down and have dinner around a dinner table, right? Because that was uncomfortable to me, right? So I was providing all of the money things. We were doing excellent financially, but dude, that was the extent of my provision, right? I didn't provide anything below that because I thought as long as I'm pumping money in that bank account, everything's good.
So true for so many men. I went through that whole thing. My wife's always made more than me, and it for years was the biggest
Yeah.
thing that in my brain, I would never talk about it, but in my brain it was like, and even still I catch myself this to this day. She earns probably not twice what I earn anymore, but she for a long time was earning over twice what I was. And it was that in the back of my head, it was like, this is wrong. I should be providing the most. I should be the bread earner, but we don't have to be.
Not because most of us do it at all costs, right? I mean, we will work to do it at all costs, and again, that cost is ourselves, right? I mean, that I was planning on, hey, one day when I make all of the money that needs to be made, and when I achieve all the things that I'm going to achieve, then I'm going to come back and live my life, right? That was essentially the plan, right? And again, like that was the stretch I was running, right? That was the restlessness, for me running into cancer when I found out I had it the first time,
Oh,
or when I found out I had it, it was kind of a breeze. Found out my kidney, had my kidney removed inside of around 20-day window. I was back at work 6 days later, right? Because that's what I was
that's how
doing,
you
right?
provide.
Just back at it. But then right at year 5, right, it came, they thought it was back and they had found something on my left kidney. And the moment for me was my wife told me that I was the missing man in my own life. My wife looked at me on the across from the dinner table. We had just found out that afternoon that I had actually beat cancer and everything was fine and the scare wasn't anything. And finally, I said the words to her as I was afraid to die, right? I thought that I was just coming out of things. I was just starting to live life, and then it was going to be taken from me. The life that I had always been working towards was about to be taken from me. And she looked at me and said, and this is my current wife, she said, she's living the life that she's always dreamed of. She's amazed that we've done it, and she can't wait for me to join. And she thought that as soon as I was done building businesses, that I would come back and join life. Her view was that business was what fulfilled me. And my view was I was out building the life that was good enough. And that night she told me, A, that I was obviously good enough because we had made the life that she always wanted. And then she told me that I was the missing man in my own life.
Was this before or after this was after your son, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So this
So
was this was just January 2024. Yeah, and again, and that was the shockwaves, right? Because we always talk about people going missing, right? And are you in your life or are you not in your life, right? And leave no man behind. And dude, I don't think it's just me. I think so many men are missing, right? They're
yeah.
missing the life that they've built. They're out building so much, doing so much great, helping so many other people, and they're not a part of it. They're not a part of the actual life that they're building.
What's your first step then for somebody who's like, oh my God, they have that epiphany moment, maybe their son, maybe they find out they're having a son, or their wife tells them that maybe they're on that brink of, destruction and, going to go through that first divorce and they don't want to, like I was.
Yeah.
Maybe they are in early stages of life. The modern man is, learning a lot more, the one that wants to, because there's so much information. They can learn all this stuff so much younger than, you and I could.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up with the internet. I grew up, scraping my knees and crashing my bicycle. Um, what is that first step for that man that wants to start to take control of his life and not just be physically present, but actually be emotionally, spiritually present with their family, or be spiritually present with themselves, so that then they can actually find a family?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, I think the biggest thing, and I don't know your experience with it, but I have lost friends to suicide, right? I've seen too many guys kill themselves because they didn't think that anyone understood, right? Or they thought that they had gone too far. So for me, the biggest thing that I think men should hear and should know, and it's the reason that I talk so openly, and I think there's a lot of men starting to do this, is no matter how bad it is, you're not alone, right? Those feelings you feel, we all have, right? And it's allowing yourself to slow down, right? For me, when I was coming out the backside of it, right, and it was just thing after thing after thing, right? It was the cancer coming back, right? And then it was work. And the one thing that I said is, I just need a break, right? And that was a moment of just give myself a day, right? And to do nothing more than just sit with myself and just let everything else drop away. And for me, that was writing. I would sit down and I would just write. But sitting in stillness, I think, is the first step, no matter where you are, so you can just reconnect with yourself and you can stop all the external stimulus and just allow yourself to stop for a minute and say, okay, where am I really at right now? And when you start taking inventory like that, and again, people will say, hey, that's a lot to face. And you and I talked about it up front. You already know, right? So you're not exposing yourself to anything that you don't know, but stillness. And that is very hard, right? Because most men feel like if they're not out spinning the plates are going to come crashing down.
You know what? Here's the thing. I'll tell you. I'll say the real truth, which I know that I'm pretty sure. Tell me if I'm wrong here. If I'm my hallucination that you might agree with this. The plates probably are going to come crashing down.
Yes. Yeah.
And guess what? It's great because you don't need those plates all the time, man. Like, honestly, the
Yes.
plates are better to be sitting on the floor and you pick them up as you want to. You don't need to be sitting there spinning them all the time and be like, the juggling freaking mystery man at the circus.
That's it. Dude,
If you put the plates down, they won't crash, but some of them will break as you put them down because there's so many of them. And that's okay. You didn't need that plate.
Dude, I went through. So after I figured out the cancer thing, after my wife told me I was the missing man, that was January 25th, 2024. By April 2024, I had put down all the plates. One by one, I looked at every plate and said, why am I still spinning that plate? Why is that plate here? Why is it still spinning? And I started putting down stuff that I had no idea why I was even still tending to it. I still
Shattered.
carrying.
How many plates shattered?
Oh, wait, it's a funny thing. I think some would say that most of them did. I would say, no. I looked at it and said, not that one, not that one, not that one. But the hook in all of this, and there's never been a more true statement than this. When it all ended, and I've called it a beautiful tornado, I've called it setting everything on fire. When it was all said and done, the only thing left after all of it was just the stuff that mattered.
Yeah, so true.
Right? I mean, like, that's what I think that's the scariest thing for most men and probably most people to believe is when you put down all of the stuff that was never yours to begin with, all that's left is just the stuff that matters to you.
Guess what? You get to make that choice.
That's it. Yeah. And look, you get to decide if it's enough, right? And listen, I walked away from a 25 plus year career of turning around businesses and being the turnaround guy and being the best at this thing and being the best at that side. Walked away from it. I didn't stop working. I didn't go into some midlife crisis. I've now got 2 businesses of my own that work on my terms, that do what I want to do. I spend all day at home with my wife. I work. I spend time with my family. I'm involved with my kids' school, making more money than I ever made, but I'm doing it from a place of it's what I want to be doing. So every day when I sit down to work, I'm actually filling myself rather than just draining myself.
You're not spinning plates anymore. You're just looking at them. They're just, yeah.
That's it. Yeah. And again, it sounds unreasonable and I get it. But I think if people really take a step back, most of what you're carrying around in your life doesn't even belong to you.
No, it's your father's trauma that he took out on you at 5 years old.
Yeah, that's it.
There's a technique which I think men might find effective that are listening to this, that are resonating with our conversation today. They're still with us at the almost hour mark. I know how you watch the trends on podcasts. I'm sure you do the same thing. They fall off, and so those men that are still here, I praise you, because this is where the real meat always comes out. There's a tool that I learned from a conference, and it's called effective blaming. And I don't know if you've heard of this, but what it is, it's actually blaming your parent or person or whoever it was for the things that happen. So, for example, I'll use, and hopefully it's okay, Scott, I'll use you and your dad when you're 5, blaming him for all the pain, the trauma, the beatings, X, Y, and Z. I don't want to put words in your mouth. But then it's also flipping the coin over and going, but thank you. Because if you had not done X, Y, and Z, I would not be the strong, driven, passionate man that I am today without
Yep.
all of that.
Absolutely.
Not
Yeah.
that it was a good thing. Not that we want anybody to, experience what you did, but we cannot. My dad left when I was 5 and went to chiropractic school for like 4 years, 3 years. So he was gone every week, most of the year, going to San Francisco, about 4.5, 5 hours from my hometown in Northern California, Redding. And he would come back on the weekends. And now that I've done work on myself, I remember like, and my mom would tell me this, I would cry myself to sleep because my dad is like, even still, my dad is like, he and I are like, house on fire. We go paragliding. We're like best friends. And as a kid, he was more of a friend, and in my upbringing, he was more of a friend, and still is than a dad. I can now go to him. He's done a lot of growth on himself. He got divorced, and knew my stepmom, has held that space for him that he needed to be able to grow and stop drinking and all these different things as well. But he would leave, and that trauma every single weekend. And as a 5-year-old, I did some work on it, and I remember the night that he left, and all I wanted to say was, "Don't go." I didn't know where he was going. I didn't know what he was at 5, but I know that he came in, he said that he was leaving and that he would be back next weekend. And I had to go through that same thing of, it's not as bad, like it's not to the level, in my mind, to the level that you went, but for me as a 5-year-old, so I always wanted to be seen. I always wanted to see, and partly why I do what I do today, that positive side. I'm out there, I'm outspoken, I have conversations, I'm talking about me right now because there's an aspect of wanting to be seen, because I didn't feel like I was seen by him at that stage in life. And so if we can do that effective blaming on everybody in a way, and the power in it is actually telling this to the person. And I did this with my dad after I came back from this seminar, and he and I had a big hug and cried and all this kind of stuff. And it's just like, it's an amazing experience to go through once you let those things go and you realize they are not about you.
Yeah.
It is what happened and you experienced it, but it is not about you.
Yeah.
It's humbling
Yeah.
and scary all at the same time.
Yeah. Listen, it's a matter, and I say this all day, every day. I wouldn't change a thing, right? If someone came and said, magic wand, you can change any one thing, but it will alter where you are today if you change a thing. My answer would be absolutely not, don't touch a thing. Because again, I think we're all here to serve a purpose, whatever that purpose is. And again, it doesn't all have to be we're all here to save the planet, right? Like everyone's got a purpose to serve. And again, I think men are extremely purpose driven, right? Just an extreme, we have a drive in us that just is mostly unexplainable. And I think if we allow ourselves to put our real selves behind that power, I think we can do incredible things as soon as we drop everything that's not ours, right? We can drop all the expectations of the people around us. We can drop all of the stuff that doesn't belong to us and just be ourselves. And we still get to be strong men out doing what we want to do. That's the group of men that change. That's the group of men that break generational cycles and get us out of this swirl of just pushing and pushing and pushing, right? We all need to give ourselves a break, reset, put down what doesn't belong to us, and come out stronger the other side. And I don't care if you're 24 or if you're 60, you still have time, right? You still have time to just look at it and say, this doesn't belong to me anymore. And it doesn't mean you go retire on a beach. It doesn't mean you turn into a monk. You just go live your life, right? The life that you choose. I mean, how many men are out grinding, waiting for one day over the rainbow when they get to live the life they choose, right? Like it's not already here today.
I remember, my wife is really good at, because I can fall into that trap of like, oh my God, like I've got to do the grind. I've got to make this. I've got to do that. I've got to do this, that, the other thing. And I'm really good now, but for years it was. And she'd always be like, Chris, tomorrow's not promised. She lost her best friend at 21, and it changed her world and her perspective of everything. She was meant to be getting married. She had bought a house with this guy, and then her best friend died from cancer at 21. Healthy, fit, like literally the complete opposite persona of anybody that you'd think would get cancer. And she got cancer and died. And it was pretty quick. And my wife talks about being being depressed, bedridden, couldn't get out of bed. And then she says the one thing that she did, and for any men or out there, or even any person out there that's listening to this, she just was like, okay, I just need to. It got to a stage where she's like, okay, I've got to keep going. Her best friend would not want her to, be stuck in this bed. And she's like, okay, today I'm just going to, and I think with the help of her mom, she's like, I just need to sit up was the first step. Then it was like, I just need to get out of bed. Second step. Then it was, I need to have a shower. Third step. Like, and it was just those steps, but it changed her perspective of tomorrow's not promised.
Yeah.
And men,
Yeah.
tomorrow is not promised. And if you're not living the life that you want to be living, I'm not saying go burn it down like I did. But if you need to, go burn it down. Like, honestly, have a complete shift and change. And hopefully you have a supportive partner if you're in it, or if you're alone, it will change your life and you will end up finding that person, because you can't find a person unless you are truly yourself.
Yeah. 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 The curse of waiting for someday, right? Or waiting for one
The
day
someday.
is
Someday that's a never day.
yeah, and right. It's rough, right? And that's what I had to face when I had cancer, right? Is like, hey, the one day I was working towards this. This is not fair. This is not fair. I may not make it to that one day, right? And you look at it and go, that one day is right here. It's today, right?
It's the day you make it.
Yeah, yeah, and for me, I figured out, and I did this thing, and it was about 10 hours, and I did a full inventory of my life, and I'm talking one by one by one, oldest daughter, wife, son, daughter, job, all the way down of everything that I had going in my life, and I figured out that I was living my life upside down, right? So what was most important to me was oldest daughter, wife, son, daughter. Where I lived my life was on the other end of that stuff. This debt, that debt, work, make sure that's paid, make sure that's good, make sure that person's good. Because what I was going to do is after everything else on that list was settled, then I would get to spend time with my family. And that was the biggest trick I was running on myself.
Where did you fall in that list? Like you personally as Scott?
Look, right? I wasn't in that list.
Oh, and it's so true for so many men. So many people, but let's talk about men, like men especially, man. Like they are not even on their list. That how did that hit? Did you recognize that at the time?
So the lady I was with, and she's ruthless, right? We get all the way through, and I was driving home afterwards, and I was still pretty rattled from the day, and she said, "Hey, I just want to let you know you forgot something." I was like, "Oh, what did I forget?" And she said, "You." But there's the moment of, and we've talked about this, and it sounds so opposite to what society tells us, right? And it almost sounds quirky and unreal, but the fuller you are, right, the more you have to give to each other, to give to others, right? I was always working from just keep pouring out, because I was waiting for someday someone was going to fill me, right? Something was going to fill me up, and then that was going to be the thing. Is after I help all these people, I was going to find the one magic person that was going to turn around and give it to me in return.
Your dad was going to give you a big hug.
What I flipped on its head is I start filling me, and then the overflow is more than I ever would have given anyone else.
Yeah. From our talking, it sounds like you were waiting for the perpetual dad to come actually give you a hug, to actually but in turn the dad is you are the only person that can fill that tank up. It's interesting. I learned the same thing when I was on that motorcycle trip. I learned how, and going through that counseling, was that if I'm not full, if my tank isn't overflowing, my wife's tank I can't fill my wife's tank up. I can't be there. I can't be present. I can't have a good relationship. I can't nourish that relationship. And then I can't actually then nourish my work. I can't nourish any of that. So I actually created, and for those that I believe this is what you were saying, is, by taking that account of what you were, all your different things, where you were putting time and spending that 10 hours working on that, recognize. So I put it into a pyramid. A pyramid, it's got to have a big base. Otherwise it falls apart. And so the big base at the bottom is self. It's the self-care. The middle part of the pyramid is my relationship. In that, it gets kind of split into three depending on what you have going on. If you have no relationship, cool. It's just your family and your friends. The guys that are blood. Family does not have to be blood. It can be chosen. Some of my best friends are more family than most of my family is pretty good than some of my family. And then above that is kids in that box, is in that bracket as well. And then at the very top, the smallest part of the pyramid is work.
Yeah.
Because if the other two are full, the work one's going to be completely full. And it's not about diminishing other ones or lessening them down. It's about growing the self and the relationship side of things. So many people run it upside down and then wonder why their life is always falling over.
Yeah. Listen, we'll build the foundation later once we get all this other stuff done, right?
The worst way to build a house, though. Scott, purpose. We talked a little bit about it. How did you find your purpose? How did you find purpose going through all of this? Like your true inner purpose. I mean, so many people are like, oh, it's family, it's God, but what is your true, like, the driver for you as a man, for the Scott?
Yeah, so when I was originally kind of stepping out into what I wanted to do and what I wanted to build, my original idea was to call what I was building for guys like me, right? And I sat on that name for a while. And for me, my purpose is to help guys like you, guys like me, just realize that we're missing our life. We've got an incredible life. No matter how bad it may look to you, no matter how bad it may feel, you're missing an incredible life, right? And that suffering, that pain you feel, you're not alone, right? And so my purpose is to just call men, regardless of your age, call people out of it and just say, you're not alone and you can step out of that. You can put down the stuff that doesn't belong to you and change everything. And again, I'm not saying we're going to be all monks and we're all going to go live a conscious life. What I'm saying is you get to do whatever you want to do. That's the choice, right? You get to choose the life you want to live, and it's available to everyone, and it's available at any time you want. You've just got to take the steps to get there. And, like you said about your wife, right? It starts with sitting up one day, right? Then it starts with walking the next day. It's not a finger snap, right? And it's difficult work some days, but it's all leading back to the life that you just want to wake up to every single day.
That's awesome, man. I love that. That hits too. It's such truth that we've lost this day because we got the instant gratification of the scroll demon on our phone. And we see
Yeah.
everybody's perfect life, but we don't see what it took to get there. My wife and I were actually talking about this yesterday while we were driving around before she flew out to come back to the United States actually for a week. And we were talking about the fact of how I was talking to her about the fact that I still sometimes am challenged to remember back to what it took to get out of my hole because I've moved so far through it and past it. I've created. I'm on. This is the second kind of business that I've done. I do it on the side. I work in sales in a hotel now because I wanted to shift and a change from running my own business. But I used to help aspiring police with their fitness and how to not end up where I did. And then I got to a stage multifaceted, like it is multi-layered, and I'm simplifying the crap out of it right now. But I got to a stage where I was like, I've moved so far beyond this, I can't relate anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't relate to what the dark, deep pain and suffering and challenges that it put on everybody around me anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems so foreign. I mean, mine was not even 2 full years ago, and I still look back like, my God, what was I going through? Like, what was I
Mm,
doing? It feels years away. So I can think of people now and just be like, they feel so far away.
yeah.
And again, it's just because it was never meant to, I was never meant to be in the middle of it anyway, right? It was never
Yeah.
mine. And I'm sure you went through this disassociating, right? People don't realize you just check out sometimes to go handle life, right? You're just a shell. You're just out doing things. So there's a most of your life in some cases when you're in deep in the pit where you're just a robot, right? You're just out doing things without thinking. So when you look back, there's parts of it where you go like, oh, that seems fuzzy. Well, it's because you weren't actually there,
No,
right?
you
You were
weren't
just kind
you
of
weren't
making your
present.
way through.
Yeah, you weren't present. Scott, I wanna something came up earlier on that I'm curious about, but I think it'll also be really good for listeners, viewers, especially on the relationship side of things. What's the difference between your past marriage and your current marriage, and why is the current one succeeding and the past one didn't?
Yeah. So that one's hard, right? Because that one requires a truth that's uncomfortable, right? And the biggest difference between a broken marriage and one that's never been better was the guy you're staring at on the through the screen, right? I was working on just being the provider, right? And I mean, whatever it took, right? And I was commuting. I was working in Atlanta. We were living in Orlando. I was gone 5 days a week. I would fly home and I would be exhausted. And there hit a moment where I did all the stuff that people do, right? That I was drinking too heavy. I was getting too tired coming home from to come home on the weekends and just was gone, right? So I started living this life where my ex-wife and I, we didn't talk, right? We didn't sit around a dinner table and eat, right? And I mean, and then it came down to at some point, right? I had this brainiac idea of, all right, well, listen, I'm gonna see this one through until my daughter's old enough. So I'm gonna be here with her. We're gonna keep this marriage together until she's old enough, and then we'll deal with this. And my oldest daughter has looked at me several times, and she was like, "I knew, like you guys should have been done way earlier." Yeah. But again, that goes to what we've talked about, right? The manly thing to do was to grit it out, right? Was to stay in it. And, there was just a lot of truths that I hid from myself and a lot of lies I told myself to avoid dealing with some harsh realities in that relationship. And now I can speak freely to my wife, right? I share how I'm feeling with my wife now. So there was one problem in my first relationship, and there's one great part of this relationship, and really the biggest part was me, right? And who I brought. I was the problem in the first one, and now I bring, and again, not always perfect, but my wife can count on me to bring exactly who I am and to be present and to just, when I'm struggling, I'll look at her and say, I'm struggling today, right here, and here's why, instead of living in just silence. And when you're not telling the truth, especially to yourself, and when you're holding these things in, and again, we've talked about this, you're already carrying those feelings, right? They don't just fade away. All of those conversations that you don't have, all of those words you don't say, they just sit inside of you and spin and spin and spin. Silence. I was a silent guy for a very long time. And
Brutal honesty.
yeah, it took a lot away from me.
Yeah, it's so true. My wife and I talk about it, we get asked as well, like, what's the key to the strong relationship that we have? I mean, even before we went through the stuff where I asked for a divorce and, we went through the dark days, as I call them, the growth days is what I should call them, is people still used to be like, your guys' relationship's so amazing, I wish I could find a relationship like yours. And I remember at times people would say that, I'm like, I am so unhappy right now, and it had nothing to do with my wife. It had everything to do with me. And now people say, people still say it to this day, and I'm like, it's communication, man. Like it's communication being present. That whole absent makes the heart grow fonder is a bunch of bullshit. If you're not
Yeah.
present, then it does. I'm curious because I mean I can't relate to it. I'm one of the 15% of relationships that make it through those really dark days. Why don't you believe, Scott, that was it too far gone? Was it that I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what was it about that first marriage that made it so it wasn't salvageable?
Yeah, it was so far gone. I had a lot of misdeeds, right? So I was running wild for a long time, right? And it was one of those moments where I had done enough damage to where she was never really gonna find forgiveness for me. And again, like, listen, I'll stand up and say probably a good idea on her side, right? So and again, this comes down to I was the one that wrecked that, right? I ran wild. And again, a lot of it was just in my own silence. I mean, I was 46 years old the first time that I realized that I was loved. I was doing an ayahuasca journey, and the entire journey was about I was loved. And I mean, to the point where I started calling people the next day to say, "Hey, I'm really sorry about that. I had no idea that you loved." Right? So that
Yeah.
was the guy. That was the shell of a guy that had gone through 46 years of life, never even realizing that anyone loved him. And you can do a lot of really wild stuff when you don't know you're loved.
Yeah. Yeah, and I thank you. Thank you for sharing that Scott. And because there's so many people out there that are like they want to save the marriage, but there comes a point where there's too much damage, and it's better to walk away, love and forgive, and move on. I see it. My parents, I was like your daughter. My parents told me they were going to get a divorce finally. I think it was the day of or the day after my 18th birthday. And in my mind, I was like, it's about fucking time. But at the same time, I mean, it still hurts, it still hurts in that. But I look at my parents now and they're much better off for it. My
Yeah.
dad is extremely happy. My mom, if she's listening to this, she still has work to do, but she knows that. But you look at it, and you're like, yeah, they should have. I mean, I watched my parents' wedding video. They should have never gotten married, to be perfectly honest. And I've said that, and my mom had said it before. I don't know, she and I have talked about it. But she married my dad because she got pregnant with me. She did love him, and she was in love with him, and they had like the
Yeah.
greatest times. But at the same time, there wasn't that mutual levels of love. I think my dad loved my mom more than my mom loved my dad. And I'm probably putting my foot in it here. My mom's probably going to listen to this and be like, what the hell? But anyways, she and I have conversations about these things anyways. So it'll be a conversation starter. But it's so true. And then you move on and you find somebody and you learn from those mistakes that you had in the past. You take that, and I love the fact that you're just taking so much ownership. It's so great to see because so many men need to take that. I love. Do you know Jocko Willick's?
I do.
Yeah, his extreme ownership speeches. It's so important. I remember hearing that, and it just reiterated things. I'd love to. I know we're kind of getting up into that kind of close to that hour and a half, but I'm okay to keep going if you are. I want to hear about, because I've never done ayahuasca, but being on that growth side of things, being ex-cop, there's that kind of drug type thing. But ayahuasca, I feel if you do it in the right place with the right people.
Yeah.
'Cause I have heard some horror stories as well, like the odd one, not as like more like most people say it's amazing. But love to hear your kind of journey on that ayahuasca more because I'm curious.
Yeah, yeah. So I will say, and again, for me, psychedelic work, plant medicine work really was a big part of my change. And I'll say it's not for everyone. Going into ayahuasca, I did it in very controlled conditions.
Highly
All the
recommend
prep
that
work.
people
That's
do
it.
all
Yeah,
psychedelics, all microdosing in very controlled situations, especially in the very early days. I've never done it myself, but I do know lots of people being in that kind of mental wellness realm and circle. There's a lot of people out there that talk about it. But I mean, there's lots of research that's coming out around microdosing LSDs and things like that to help
yeah,
military and police veterans on PTSD because it does open things up and gives them clarity and removes them from being in the depths of it at the same time.
absolutely.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
I just want to put
yeah.
that
No,
caveat on
it's
there
all good. I mean,
before we dive deep into this because somebody will be like, "Oh, I'm gonna go do it," and they'll go do it in their basement and
yeah.
like actually skits out.
Listen, it's some of the hardest stuff that you'll do, right? And again, it's because it strips away all of the story and it leaves you sitting just with you, right? And for me, my first ever ayahuasca journey was realizing that I was loved, right? My second journey was just facing torment. As in, laying in this, and I remember it was outdoors, right? And we were just kind of laying in this field. And for me, it was just hours of spinning and just torment, just all of this noise and all of this stuff just swirling in my mind, right? So I never had the right. I've never seen the dragons. I've never seen the beautiful colored lights. My work has always been just deep excavation, and I'll say it's never given me more than I can handle. It's given me a lot to feel very uncomfortable with, but for me, it's always worked in a way that's been very, very easy and just hands me enough for me to then reflect on later and look at that and say, okay, why was that here? Why did I think that way? Why did I look at stuff that way? I have sat with guys in the military. I've sat with guys with serious PTSD I've just watched it change everything about them, and really just takes your perspective and it tips it upside down and just shows you a different thing, shows you a different way, shows you what else it felt like, right? And it gives you your own permission to just, and again, we've talked about this, just let certain stuff go. But again, really, really hard work. I've done three ayahuasca retreats. I just got back. Well, I got back from one last year, right around this time in Costa Rica, and it was one of the wildest times. And it's got this subtle thing to it where it just makes you deal with stuff that you never want to deal with. And for me, the biggest takeaway I had after 3 days out in the legitimate jungle in Costa Rica, I had to call for help one night. I was in the middle of a journey that I couldn't get myself. I was just looping and couldn't get myself out of the loop. And I had to call for help. And the moment I called for help and the guide came to help me, it was like all of this relief because someone finally came to help me. And you look at it and
Was
go
it
like,
was it a guy? Was it a male or a female?
it was a female, right? And she just came and she sat with me and I got to talk about what my life was like, right? And how I had wrecked my first marriage and how I had missed my daughter's life, right? And so it was like this perfect moment with her where I just let things go. But the biggest thing from that night was I called for help and someone came.
It's
And
amazing as
and
a man how hard it is to call for help.
the hardest part of the whole thing.
And like
Yeah,
I never thought that I was that person either. I was challenged with it until I reflect back on the journey that I've gone through as a man. Holy, even still
Yeah.
today, like I remember my wife. So my wife recently went through some stuff. Not to like take from your story, but I think it concretes it in. My wife went through some hard stuff recently, like a bit of an identity crisis in that. And like I've been trying to help her. Luckily, we've got I mean, going through everything, you don't have a good support system, and we're very particular on who our friends are. You know, it's like I only want a handful of friends because they're the ones that actually count. But I remember, so she was going through stuff and she was really hating work and was kind of, really at that place where she wanted to quit, but had like a lot of her childhood stuff that she needed to work through, like money stories and things as well. Again, being the bread earner, making the most money. I'm like, dude, I'm like, we'll figure it out. She hates it when well, not so much anymore, literally since this year. But she used to hate when I'd be like, "We'll just figure it out. It'll be all good. We'll sort it out." Because I have literally proof. Like we've gone to the U.S. for 3 months with no job to come back to, and I'm like, "Yeah, we'll figure it out." And I have a job waiting for me when I get back. Something happens while I'm away, and people are like, get a call while I'm
Yeah.
away and be like, "Hey, can you come work?" Yeah, I'll be back on this date. Cool. See you then. But I remember like going through it all, and we were working through all that, and she struggles big time with asking for help as well. And I remember reflecting back on it, and I remember we are going through stuff in that, and I messaged a buddy of mine, was like, or tried to call a buddy of mine, and he's busy, he runs his own chiropractic business, he is real busy, and I know all I have to do is send him a message and be like, I need you. And he'd drop everything, like literally everything. I've got, those three friends. I remember listening to a Navy SEAL, and he says you have those 3 a.m. friends that will literally like you give them a call at 3 a.m. and they're like you hear them in the background, racking their gun and getting their shovel and putting their boots on because they're like, cool, where am I meeting you? And these are those friends. But I called them during the day, and I remember I was struggling a little bit, and I was like, cool, I want to talk to somebody. And I called him once, and then kind of left it. And then he called me like 2 weeks later or something like that. A lot of time had gone past. I'd worked through it and dealt with it. And my wife and I had then talked and different things. And I remember telling him, I was like, yeah, I was going through a struggle and challenge and that. And he's like, dude, moving forward, he's like, we need a code word, like we need a code thing. Like, we're both very busy, and he had just recently, and I'd seen it already, but Simon Sinek did a thing around somebody that he was talking to, saying that you only need 8 minutes to dump on somebody to be able to get stuff out. And if you like just dedicate 8 minutes to somebody, and so he's like, this friend of Simon Sinek was like, this person they actually have a thing of like, they'll send them a message, just be like, hey, I need 8 minutes. And so my
Yeah.
my best friend and I haven't needed to use it, but he's like, dude, just if you ever need to just kind of do a verbal dump or something, he's like, if you need me in that space again, he's like, just text me. I need, 8 minutes. Just text me 8 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's that thing of that again, you find those friends when you work out yourself, but it's so hard to ask for help because like I needed somebody at that time, but I was like, I don't need them that bad. I can figure this out. I've done a ton of work on myself. So when you haven't done a lot of work, like like you're laughing like your head off, it's when you haven't done that work, it's even harder. It's so,
Yeah.
but that's so cool that the ayahuasca like actually made you like helped you realize that. How do you think that going into ayahuasca you get out of it what you go into it to get? In a way, like if you're in a place where you're open to hearing or you want to do these growth things versus if you go into it going, I don't know what I'm gonna get, and like, do you think there's an aspect?
Yeah. So what I would say is you get what you need from him, right? And what you need isn't always what you want, right? Um, for the longest time, and my own story for the longest time was everyone around me thought that most of my struggle was I had never dealt with the grief of losing my mom. So I mean, that's where most everyone was I was working with was focused on like, hey, you've got to deal with the grief of losing your mom. So when I popped up and said, oh, guess what? It's not that, right? But again, my own experience with ayahuasca is it gave me exactly what I needed. And I've journaled all about it, right? I've got stacks and stacks of journals, and it gave me this beautiful arc of just giving me enough, a little bit at a time, and taking me on this walk, right? So it was the second journey when I was in Costa Rica that I had to call for help, right? And help came. And I'll say this, I spent hours doing anything to not call for help. I was walking around our loft. I was trying to figure out how to just handle it myself, right? Because as men, we're supposed to just be able to handle things,
We're
right?
supposed to be a fix
So
it.
so I spent hours avoiding, and then I had to call on a walkie-talkie in the middle of the night and call for someone to come help me. It was horrendous. It couldn't have been the worst way to call for help. But for me, the third night, my final night on a journey was, and this comes to where talking to a man. I was in this place where I was just feeling good and I was feeling like I was going to have this really great journey, but I kept on questioning it, right? Like, no, 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 this is a trick. This is a trick. And I had to call for help again, but this time we were still in ceremony, so I had to flash my red light on myself. And I said words that really changed everything. And those words were, I don't trust God, right? And I said that to a man, and he looked at me and said, you don't trust God or you don't trust you. And again, that was a moment where if you look at that, right, ayahuasca took me on this full ride and just left. That was literally the last thing I ever dealt with it on ayahuasca was saying those words, because as soon as I said those words and as soon as I had those conversations, I was out, I was clear as day, and I spent the rest of the night journaling about what it would take for me to trust myself.
What was that? I'm curious.
Oh man, it was facing some of the truths that I was hiding from myself, right? It was me still hiding stuff from myself, still lying to myself, still holding stuff back from myself, right? Waiting for someday. And still not trusting that I do know that I'm on the right path here and this does feel good, right? And not caving to expectations or what someone else wants me to do. And boundaries. For me, boundaries was such a big part of this. And right, and you've talked about it, keeping that circle small. There were people that were just draining my life, and I knew it, but I never wanted to let them down, right? And again, I would walk out of some situations and be like, why do I keep doing this, right? And they didn't have a gun, they didn't have handcuffs, they didn't have me tied up in the basement, right? I was doing it to myself, and so self-trust was a large part of my journey. And again, I think, and regardless of what you've been through, if you take a moment and really let yourself look at, no matter where you're standing today, if you look at it and say, this is what it took, this is what I did, this is what I've overcome time and time and time again to be standing here today, I mean, you're capable of so much, right? I mean, it doesn't matter how desperate times have come. To be standing where you are today, you have done more than you even allow yourself to take credit for. And I think, for me, it was, no, I was just surviving. No, I was just getting by. No, I was doing what it takes. And I minimized how much pride I really should have had in myself for doing the things that I did, for overcoming, for excelling, for all of those things. Not to chalk them up to, no, I just did what it took. Like, no, man, like we all do really hard things every single day, and we don't give ourselves credit for much of it. We just see it as just taking life as it comes. So when you start to build your new life, right, or start to make those changes, and part of my series that I do, I have a 7 arc, and it's really journeys of, I've took all the different modalities that I've went through and I put them into this 7 arc journey. And one of them is just reclaiming pride, right? And really looking and going back and looking at all the things that you've done that people said you couldn't do, that you thought you couldn't do. And when you start stacking up that evidence of who you are, of what you've done, you've really got to then look at it and say, well, then why wouldn't I be able to do what I want to do? If I did all of that stuff just to survive, just to get here, just to appease everyone else, then why in the hell wouldn't I be able to decide what I want to do and go do it?
Yeah, imagine if you shift that spear.
That's it, right? I mean, like listen, you are living proof that you can do even the stuff you really don't want to do, you can
Yep.
do it. So what if you take that and go, hey, I'm actually just going to do the stuff that I want to do?
Yeah, I'm gonna shift
Like,
that.
what would
I'm gonna
that
shift
look
that
like?
focus. I'm gonna take that masculine trait of focus, and I'm gonna shift it from the things that I hate fucking doing to the things that I actually want to do. And oh my God, like it's absolutely insane. But we
Yeah,
do it,
yeah,
especially as men, we do it, and women are doing it a lot these days as well. But I feel personally that that's because women over the years of the equality movement, which don't take it wrong, audience. I do believe that women should have equality, but I don't think that they should have to or be forced into taking the male role. And I think that's what's happened a lot these days. And so this is why we have this, this situation we're in where men are lost because women are now doing, because they've been pushed into it, all the roles, not just being able to have the possibility to do all the roles, but actually being pushed into it. There's been my wife and I had talked about it with some friends the other day around how there was no training for men. It was this thing of women want all the same rights as guys, which again, I totally honestly am on board with. But there's been no training on, okay, cool. If the women are going to now go start working and going to have two income households, what's the new role of a man? Because there is a new role of a man. There's a role of now a man actually has to step up in the household as well and look after kids and help clean and help cook and help all those things that the woman used to do because the man was the one that was out working all the time and the woman was the roles were that she looked after kids, she was at home and made dinner and did all that stuff. Now the roles have shifted and guys don't have that anymore. And so we do have to get that shift and we have to get that thing that change. But I do feel like women also now have, again, with that shift, have been changed and pushed into the more masculine state instead of being able to and having that space to fall in that feminine. So now men don't have that as this dynamic, this shift of dynamic that needs to come back, which we've talked a lot about how you find that in a man and how a man becomes himself so that then he can actually bring that to the relationship and change that aspect and actually step up and provide and protect, and not the old traditional 1920s ways, but the now 2020 ways, which is completely different, which is why, we're having these conversations. And yeah, it's an interesting world these days, but thanks for sharing everything today, Scott. It's been great.
Man, this is an amazing conversation. And again, listen, it's just about trying to pull men back into their life, right? And when you talk about different roles, right? I mean, there are so many missing men, right? And they're out doing what they think is noble. And quite honestly, if you poll most men, they don't want to be doing what they're doing, right? So that has got to shift, right? And men have got to return back to themselves, right? And return to what they want to be doing. The most dangerous man is a man that's doing what he wants to do, right? And what's dangerous about that is it's dangerous for good, right? Men that are out to do good in this world, and that's what they want to do, and that's what they're doing, they will get it done.
They will. It's in our genes. Like literally goes back to hunter-gatherer years. 2 million, 3 million years ago, we will get stuff done if we are pointed in the right direction. I mean, man has conquered the world. I'm sorry to say, women, you backed the man and you were there and you were the anchor and the grounding for him. But men were the ones that went out, and I'm sorry to say it, but women, I don't think, yes, there are the odd ones, but I don't think women would have achieved what the man did, conquering the world and exploring the world, just because we have those natural traits of direction, focus, laser focus. We will conquer and win at all costs. And yes, women these days have been pushed into that, but it's a masculine trait. The conquering at all costs is a masculine trait. It's not a feminine trait. The caring, the loving, the compassion, the detail, that is women. Men is we conquer and we win at all costs, even if it's our own cost.
I'll say this, and again, this is certainly what I've found through my wife, right? Is there is a level of divinity in women, right? Women can take us to where we should be, right? To take us back to our heart, right? And what women are far better than men at is intuition and following their true intuition.
Far better, a
millionfold
better.
And listen, they just know, man. You know what I mean? Like
and listen to it. Like, man, listen to your wife's and your partner or your girlfriend or whoever, or a female friend's intuition. If she says something doesn't feel right, ask why and what do we need to do about it, because I can guarantee it, shit's about to go wrong.
Yes. Yeah. I mean that is the most powerful thing, right? When you can be tuned in to intuition, whether it's your own or for me it's through my wife, right? I'm able to look at my wife, and when she says don't do this, or this is important, right? Or hey, that doesn't feel right, like you just said, like, man, I am all ears. Right?
Guys, we do have intuition. It just because of the masculine side of men, it is not as in tune, or it's not as loud. I'm gonna call it. It's not as in your face. Whereas women, it gets like literally it slaps them. My wife has a massive superpower of when she knows her intuition kicks in. She can be on the other side of a freaking room, and she will know when I'm about to put my foot in it. I'm
Yeah.
outspoken. I am American at core, where I am outspoken, and when I believe in something, I believe in it. I will listen to other sides, but I will probably put my foot in it along the way. And she will be on the other side of the room, and I'll feel this like I'm like, and like I'm talking, and now that I know that this is her superpower and intuition, I'll look over at her, and she'll be like,
Yeah. 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 It's that team, right? I mean, men don't have to carry it all,
no,
right? I mean, and and again, when you can start to put stuff down, and I believe very much in intuition, right? We call it our gut, right? And we call it all this other stuff. But the reality is you can't trust your intuition if you're spending every day lying to yourself, right? If
no.
you're buried in your own lies and your intuition pulls at you and says, "Hey, don't do that thing. Hey, don't do that thing." And you're just in survival mode, you have to turn that thing off, right? You have to look and say, that intuition, that gut feel I have can't be right here. It can't be right. I know I have to do
But you also, I mean, when you don't know yourself and you don't know what the truth, what your true truths are, you don't know if that intuition is actually true, or if it's that ego, or if it's that story, or if it's that little 5-year-old kid
it.
who doesn't trust anybody and can't, and is afraid to ask for help because if he's loud, he's going to get the shit kicked out of him.
Yeah.
Of course, you're not going to listen to your intuition and you're not going to hear it and see it. I mean, again, we
Yeah.
circle back to the very beginning of the conversation.
Yeah.
Once you know yourself and I mean, it's scary, man. Like, I'm gonna put it out there. It's scary knowing yourself. Like, when you don't know yourself, it's scary starting to peel those layers of that onion away. I mean, it gets real scary because you actually have to look in the, like we've said, look in that mirror. Like,
Yeah.
who is that person that's there? And I know from personal experience, when you don't like the person that's on that other side of the mirror, you don't look in the mirror, both literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
Because when you
Yeah.
honestly do not like yourself, again, your intuition is telling you you don't like yourself, like there's something wrong. And when you don't like, man, is it scary? But going back to that female, we all have a strong, like, men who are single out there that are like, I don't need a woman in my life. Bullshit. My wife grounds me. My wife, she's a sounding board. My wife is my anchor. Like, I remember one anniversary, I bought her a like necklace that is an anchor, like obviously nice jewelry, but it was an anchor. And like with the card that went with it was like, I'm like, you are my anchor.
Yeah.
Like, yes, I can stand on my own 2 feet. I can do all my own stuff, and I've had to learn more and more about it over the years. But she's my anchor. She's that center of my universe where I'm like, cool, I can go out and be crazy and do stupid shit, and I always know that I have a place to come back to. It's like I was on recording a podcast yesterday with a guy that I've known for years, and we were talking about kind of the same thing. And the scene that from a movie that always comes up is that scene in 300.
Yeah.
Just before he kicks the guy into the pit, he looks over his shoulder at his wife and he gets the head nod.
Yeah.
That it's not the I'm needing approval. It's the am I on the like just that check in. Am I on the right path here? Like, you know what I'm about to do. Is this right? Like, am I on the right path? Do we like are we going down this road? And if you have that strong, again, you got to be very smart on who you have backing you though as well, because if she's ego driven, if she doesn't know who she is, it can go very wrong very quickly, which we've seen, through history.
Yeah. Listen, my wife is my tether to what's right. When I feel off track, I'm able to just pull back close to her, recenter. And again, when I put her back at center, when, my wife for me is true north, right? When
Yeah.
I am fully centered with my wife, I'm unstoppable. I can sit down and hatch a plan to do the wildest thing, right? As long as it's fully, if I talk to her about it and really see that she's in and she understands, and right, if she's got feedback, I accept it. But man, when her and I are lockstep,
Oh,
unbeatable.
it's amazing.
Unbeatable.
And
Yeah.
as you both, and this is so important for guys out there that are looking for a mate, or a partner in life, is be very particular on who you pick as well. You have to be smart on this, uh, but also you can't find that person if you're not that person already. Like, if you're not acting as the person. It was something that came out of that recording yesterday as well, which just reiterated, you attract what you put out. If you're working on yourself, I'm sure that will be why you attracted your wife that you have now. But yeah, it is, man. When you have that person next to you, like my wife questions me, and like, man, she holds
Yeah.
that mirror up sometimes, and she'll ask me the best. Like, I'm like, man, you should be the coach, not me. Like, honestly,
Yeah.
you ask the much better
Yeah.
questions. You see right through everything so much clearer. And I'm like, she'll ask me questions like yesterday in the car. She like was challenging me on my why. My why and my mission statement has been I create less pain for myself and others to create the best version of ourselves. And she's like, pain is too broad. She's like, everybody experiences pain. Like, and we've done like my routine and my process with her on hers is to create joy in people. And she's like, not everybody experiences joy, but everybody will experience pain. And I'm like, and she got me, and I literally can't stop thinking about it. I was sitting on the deck smoking a cigar last night, just chilling because I'm home alone at the moment. Just literally, I was out there for like 3 hours, and it kept popping into my head. I was like, and I, again, being a man, didn't actually start asking myself the questions of why. Just was like, that's really strange. Like, she's so right. But I don't know where to go from here with it. Like, but I've got the process. I know how to do it. It's just I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
My wife, and again, she has been by my side. She saw me before I knew me, right? So I mean, she bought in much earlier.
She actually saw you before you saw you, and she could see right through the old you.
Absolutely. Yeah, and now, right, and we talked about, the I love the 8 minutes thing with you and your friend, but for me, my wife can just look at me and say bubbles. And when she says bubbles, for me it's just a stop and I just look at what's going on around me, because what that is I'm falling into an old cycle. Whatever it is, she's just giving me a moment to take a breath, and whatever the situation I'm in is just stop for a minute and go, okay, what's happening right now? And I'll tell you, there's times where like I almost get ready to jump, and then I'll just ease back in, and later on, 20, 30 minutes later, I'll just be like, thank you. Right? Like I didn't see it, I didn't know it, right? Thank you. And it's just, and again, that's the team, right? That is the wife that just is there standing next to me. And now that I'm working at home, right? And I'm building here at home, we're doing stuff around the house together, right? We handle this house together, right? Before, I thought my role was just go out, make all the money, come home and just relax because I'm out working so hard.
The
Right.
1920, the 1920 masculinity.
Yeah, right. And I just left everything to her, right? And now I look back at it, and we talked about it earlier, it feels so foreign now, right? Like, why in the hell would I leave everything under this roof to her? You just look at it and go, it doesn't make sense. And again, in my mind, it was, well, because I'm out doing all the work, right? I'm out making the money, right? I'm out doing all this stuff, and I need a break. But again, I was sitting in my chair, unwinding, couldn't be bothered because I had a rough day at the office, and that meant I just wasn't here, right? I just wasn't. I was just checked out, long gone. And after a long day at work, when my son missed me, when my wife missed me, when my daughter missed me, I couldn't be bothered because I was too tired from working outside of the house.
And guys, it's okay to be tired, and it's okay to need a moment to yourself and to take, again, it goes back to what we talked about, that self-care. Yes, do those self things. I paraglide, I motorcycle ride. It used to be the gym a lot as well. I still go. Honestly, the gym's fallen to the wayside, but different priorities in my life, and I still go for runs and that to kind of make myself feel better talking about that. But anyways, long story for another day. But I motorcycle ride, I paraglide, I also spend time with my wife. I will just chill on the deck. But I communicate to my wife. Like, I remember there's a stage where I was like, for me, not for our relationship, but for me, I want to sit down and actually eat dinner together because it makes me feel better. Also, I feel like then we're more connected. And so my wife would stop eating before I got home from work, and she would wait the extra hour, and then we'd eat dinner together. And so she now implements that, again, the communication side of things, but it is that working together on things. And man, I cherish your time, and I also cherish everybody who's listening and watching, because we could keep going. I love these conversations. They get better and better the longer you kind of talk with them. I remember, like, I've never actually sat down, besides like maybe like sat down and actually watched like the 3 hour episodes of Joe Rogan. And I watched like Diary of a CEO, and those are like 2.5 hours. My wife will watch, and I will sit down and watch those at night together. And I remember before I sat down and started watching those Diary of a CEO conversations, I was like, there's no way I don't have the quote unquote time to sit and listen to like a 3 hour podcast. And now that I've watched some of those, and now that I'm having these like different conversations where we actually dig into things that, we wouldn't normally always talk about, except for with our close 3 a.m. friends as such a lot of times. Now I'm like, man, an hour and a half, an hour it's literally, you're just starting to get into the heat of it all. But yeah, no, man, I think we're at a good place where I think we kind of start to wrap up. I do have a traditional question that I ask everybody at the end. But I just want to open the floor for you if there's any last kind of remarks or words from your learnings from your, yourself, from, for the man out there that might be, challenged, struggling, wanting to learn more. Yeah, any kind of wrap up words that you have, Scott. And again, I appreciate you being here and being so open and vulnerable and talking about some, deep stuff today. And I know you've done a lot of work, so you're at that kind of more advanced stage, but it's also, as a man, it's still hard to talk to a stranger that we literally have not talked besides maybe 3 emails of back and forth organizing this, and then we, as
Yeah.
always, just hop on and hit the record button and start.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. I've been I'm on the podcast circuit now. I did 5 earlier this week. I've got podcasts lined up, and every one of them been the same, right? We're all facing all the same challenges, right? And again, and I've said this 100 times now, and my message is you're not alone. And I think if anything comes from me, it's just tell yourself the truth, right? And I've got all kind of processes. If you look at my website, right, and we can drop links to everything in the show
I've
notes,
got your
but
links from when you booked in. I'm going to drop
yeah,
all those links
yeah,
down in the description, so
yeah,
they'll be there.
and all of my stuff is just about telling the truth, right? I put together this journal, and it's a 30-day journal, and it asks you one question about yourself a day, and you just write it. You just write the truth. But the biggest thing is, especially with men, is allow yourself to write down the question you have, right? We all have questions in our mind, and so often we just push them away because it's another thing that we'll have to deal with. And from all of my work and all of this and everything I put together is you don't have to fix anything. When you start just letting the truth come to the surface and you start answering the questions that you have about yourself, it just starts to unfold, right? And we've said this 100 times too. You already know. The answers are already there, right? That's why I coined the term remembrance-based transformation, right? You don't need the next 10 hacks. You don't need any of that stuff. If you just allow yourself to remember what you know about yourself, you don't have to fix anything. You have to address some practical stuff, but you already know the answers about your life. And the life you want, the life you choose isn't as far away as you think. I promise you. When you finish this, when you finish telling yourself the truth and you unpack that first round, you're going to be shocked that the life you've wanted is already there waiting for
I love that, man. I love that. Yeah, so true. Once you know yourself, you can do so much more with it. Like
you.
so
Yeah.
much more. Scott, final closing question. If you could hand every man on the planet a single insight that would unlock his potential to lead, love, and live with purpose, what would you tell him?
This one, man, this one's come up a lot lately. Trust everyone, right? Trust people's words, but immediately believe their actions, right? So always offer trust up front, but then you believe actions and you make your decisions on who's in or who's out based on their actions, not their words. The number of people that I had in my circle, in my life, that said one thing and acted a completely different way, and I always went back to their words. I always looked past their actions and said, no, but Chris, I know Chris better than that. Chris is this guy. Believe people's actions and make your decisions about people in your life not on their words but on their actions. And for me, dude, that changed so much about my life because when you start doing that and you start believing actions, it's going to transform the people that are around you.
Such truth. Actions speak higher than words, man. That's
uh,
such truth.
listen, we all spin in it, right? We all see it, right? And again, I believe we should trust people around us, right? I think that's the only way is give people your trust, but then you believe their actions. And if you let their actions guide how you interact with them or how you don't interact with them, it will change everything.
I love it. Thank you, Scott. Thanks again for being here. Appreciate you. Appreciate everything you're doing, especially for men and people out there, helping really find their true self. Off the back of that, I am going to mention that I created an assessment, motivated masculine men assessment, again to find where you are and who you are and what areas of your life you need to work on. So it works on that purpose, that relationship, and that self side of things. So you can assess where you're at. So should anybody want that, you can go to my website, www.motivatedmasculinemen.com, and you can find that. Scott's got a ton of resources. I had a look at his website last night and this morning. He's got a ton of resources on there as well. The link's down in the bio for access into there. Thank you, Scott, and Thanks for being here. Anybody who wants to reach out to him, hit the links in that bio. If you want to be a guest on the show, reach out to us. You can email me at brotherhood@motivatedmasculinemen.com, which is how Scott got here. He sent me an email. So you can do that. Or if you need any assistance, you need any help, you want to talk further, maybe you don't want to do a podcast, but you just want to, have a conversation, again, drop that email, drop me an email. It's in the bio as well, as always. Make sure you like, subscribe, and most importantly, and I think Scott will agree with this, share this around so that everybody, just share it to one person so that we can make that little bit of impact to that man out there or that woman that wants to learn more about her man. And so then we can, create a better planet, create a better place, and all really just love ourselves and have a good time. That's the most important thing.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
thank you again.
Of course, man. Until next time, train hard, test easy. We will talk to you soon.